Well, hello. It's great to be speaking with you today. If we haven't met before, as Andy and Shari said, my name's Ben, and I'm one of the leaders here at the church. My role here is the experience lead, which basically means I look after what happens on a Sunday. Also, I'm part of our BV community, so holla, big shout out to the BV community. Missing our Sunday physical gatherings where we get to enjoy a Starbucks and a meal afterwards in the restaurant at the Village Hotel, and just the fancy carpets and the comfy. Don't you miss it? Don't you miss it? So shout out, if you're part of the BV community, stick a hello in the chat. Shout out to the BV Massive, as it were, this morning. It's so good to be speaking with you today. We are in the middle of a series at the minute called the Called series. And this is week 3 of that series. And Simon Benham, our senior pastor, he has taken us through the first 2 weeks of that series. And I'm here with you today to take us through week 3. Now, the first 2 weeks that he talked about, he was talking about what are we called to? This series on Called is what is our purpose, right? What is our destiny? What's our future? And sometimes we have this phrase that goes around the Christian world as, what is my calling from God? What am I called to? And Simon, in these first 2 weeks, began to unpack that. As human beings, as followers of God, as followers of Jesus, what is it to have a calling? What is our calling as humans? And he started by unpacking the reality that actually it's not about what we do, but our calling is about who we are. And he unpacked what we call the gospel, the good news of Jesus. And in this series, we've been dipping a lot into a book in the Bible called Ephesians. And we're going to be there today as well. Ephesians is in the New Testament of the Bible, which is the second half of it. And we call it a book, but actually really it's a letter written by this guy called Paul, who wrote a lot of the New Testament and saw lots and lots of new churches starting in the early days of Christianity. Now, Ephesians as a letter is kind of split into 2 halves. The first half talks about the gospel, the good news. It unpacks what the gospel is. You know, it says it in chapter 1, for example, for he, God, chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. And then it says this, in love, he predestined us for sonship through Jesus Christ. So right at the beginning of this letter, it says, hey, you want to know your calling? You want to know what your destiny is? You want to know what you are predestined to do? Well, you are predestined for sonship with God, that we are children of God through Jesus Christ, through what Jesus Christ did for us. And those last 2 weeks, we've been looking at that Jesus came to earth, fully God, fully man, and he died on a cross. Now, as he died on the cross, he bore what we call our sin. That the areas of our life where we live independently of God and try and do our own thing and ignore God, and the things that we do that isn't what God wants us to do, but also the things that we don't do that God does want us to do. It's like a nature within us that we struggle with, this idea of sin. Now, as it says, we are predestined for sonship through Jesus Christ. But also in chapter 2 of Ephesians, it then goes on, tells us a little bit more about it. It says, you were dead in your sin, you were dead in your transgressions, but because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, he made us alive with Christ. You may remember Simon saying that being a child of God and following Christ, receiving Jesus into your life, isn't some kind of add-on to our lives, right? It's not some kind of bonus thing, an additional thing. It is a totally transforming thing. We literally go from being spiritual corpses to being made alive. That is our calling. To receive Jesus into our lives. It's not about what we do, but it's about who we are. And then it says, for it is by grace you've been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves, but it's a gift from God. And you may remember, if you've watched these last couple of weeks, where we're saying, hey, we are not saved by good works. We can't do anything to be saved by Jesus. There is nothing that we can do. It's not about us trying to do all the good stuff, trying to say the right things and dress the right way and do the right kind of behaviors in our lives. No. We are not saved by good works. It is by grace you've been saved through faith in Jesus. So we are not saved by good works. But you may remember the second statement in that, whereas we are not saved by good works, we are saved for good works. And what we're going to do today is we're going to be looking at this idea of what happens after we receive this calling to follow Jesus. And then the question is, what next? How does it impact our lives? what happens next? You know, if we sit still and idle for too long, we're like, well, I feel like I've got to do something, right? We're not blobs that just sit and do nothing. We are led to activity. And what does that activity look like? How does knowing Jesus impact our lives? We're not saved by good works, we are saved for good works. I think of this illustration when it comes to this kind of thing of a tree. And if you think of a tree, it's got roots, it's got the tree itself, and if it's like a fruit tree or something, it'll have some form of fruit on it. I'm no agriculturalist or a farmer or anything else, but I know that fruit grows on trees generally, depending on the fruit. And so there is almost like these three elements to trees: roots, the tree itself, and the fruit. And if you're anything like me, when it comes to calling, I often look at a fruit and I think, well, what is that bit of my life? What do I produce? That's what I often think in my head is what my calling is. I go, well, the fruit of my life, that's what I'm called to. What am I called to produce? Am I an orange tree? Am I an apple tree? Am I a lemon tree? What does God want me to be, right? We often think of calling like that. But actually, as we've heard, calling is the root. Actually, because if you think of a tree, what comes from the root is the tree and the fruit comes from that. And actually, our calling isn't about the fruit. Our calling is the root. To know Jesus, to know that he has predestined us for sonship, right? So really we're looking at the fruit. So if the roots are our calling, I like to think of it that our fruit might be our missions. Our calling is to know Jesus. And within that calling, there might be some things handed to us that God goes, hey, here's something you might be able to do. Here's something that you might be able to do. It's not that it saves you, but it's that good works that we're saved for. Right? And what I want to begin to dip into that, and this is where we're sort of beginning to head into as this series continues. So the first half of Ephesians, as I said, is all about unpacking what the gospel is. The second half of Ephesians begins to unpack how it impacts our lives. You may remember this verse that Simon said, which is Ephesians 4, at the beginning of this second half of the book, verse 1. As a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. This phrase, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. This starts us off for the rest of Ephesians. I encourage you, off the back of this message, why not sit down sometime this week and just read the whole of Ephesians? It's a letter, right? It was designed to be read all in one go. So I want to encourage you to do that and just go through the whole book. We're not going to go through the whole thing today. We haven't got time, but I encourage you to do that. And I want us to start, as we begin to look in the second half, to outline really where we're going this morning, where I'm going today. I could wait until the end and go, here's the big exciting point, and boom, here you go. But I just want to give it away straight away so that you know early on where I'm going. You see, and it's this. Ephesians, as a letter, was written to a group of people, not an individual. Now that sounds really boring and mundane maybe, but that is the springboard of where we're going. Ephesians was a letter written to a bunch of Christians in a place called Ephesus. And Paul at the time was in prison, and he didn't write it to one person. He wrote it to a bunch of people, a whole collection of churches in Ephesus, a whole lot of Christians in that city. And so we now read these letters 2,000 years later, right? We read Ephesians 2,000 years later, and it is still relevant for us. But whenever we read the Bible, we need to read it in the sense of the context it was written in. Who was it written for? And Ephesians was written to a group. So as we read it today, we need to remember that and actually read it as a community. We need to read it as a collective, not just as individuals. See, it was written to the church, not to one specific person. So us as the global church and us here at Kerith Community Church, we read it as a local church as well. So we read it as people who are in the church. So who is the church, right? Who is the church? Now, there's a guy called Eugene Peterson who wrote a paraphrase of the Bible called The Message. It's just great. It's worth a read. And he writes this about the church. He says this: there are Christians, of course, who never put their names down on a membership list. There are Christians who refuse to respond to the call of worship each Sunday. And there are Christians who say, I love God, but I hate the church. But they are members all the same, whether they like it or not, whether they acknowledge it or not. For God never makes private, secret salvation deals with people. His relationships with us are personal, true, intimate, yes, but private, no. We are a family in Christ. When we become Christians, we are among brothers and sisters in faith. No Christian is an only child. Don't you just love that last phrase? No Christian is an only child. His relationships with us are personal and intimate, but they are not private. The minute we receive Jesus into our life, the minute we receive that calling from God, we are part of the church. We are part of the community across the world called the church, this gathering. The original word was ecclesia, this gathering. You are part of it. So the first and the point that I need you to go away with today is knowing that our calling, your calling, my calling, our calling is wrapped in the context of community. Our calling is wrapped in the context of community. See, God never works with individuals in an isolation, but with people in community. Now, hear me on this. He might speak individually to you, and he's wonderful like that. God is so kind like that he might speak individually, specifically to you as an individual today. But he always does that within the context of a community. How might the words that he says to you impact others? How might the things that he's doing through your life be connected to the wider world, to the wider local community, to the church? He always works through people in community. And this is proved by the next verse in Ephesians, right? Paul carries on. In verse 2, he says this: be completely humble and gentle in heart. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There's one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One faith, one baptism, one Lord, one God and Father of all, who is over all and in all. See, these things, being humble and gentle and patient with one another, bearing with one another. We can't do that in isolation, right? These things, in the nature of their very words, that they are community driven. Paul here isn't saying this is your individual calling. He's talking about, you want to know your calling? Then you need to be patient with one another, be with one another, bear with one another, do it in community. See, it's not so much about what we are called to do, but it's about who we are called to be. And off the back of that, how do we do it with others? Some years ago, I went on holiday. Heather, my wife, and I went on holiday with some of our friends, another couple of couples. And this was before children. We've got a COVID baby, a little girl who's 3 months old, and we've got a 3-year-old who's just started preschool. But this was like pre that time when we used to just be like, we're going to leave the house. And we'd get up and we'd leave the house. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful time that we will now never go back to. But anyway, back then life was very easy. And we went on holiday, right, with these couples. And we were away, and one of the couples had kids, and they just put the kids to bed. And we were like, hey, should we have a fire pit? And we were like, oh, let's have a fire pit. Love a good fire pit. So we were on this holiday park, and we think it was a bit illegal, but we thought we'd do it anyway. So we went around the back of our chalet, and all the guys, obviously doing the guy thing, we were like, we will go and get the wood. Yes, that's what we do. So we collected the wood, and we put this fire pit together. And then we did the obligatory thing of standing around it, the 3 guys just standing, nodding at this fire. Yes, look what I've created. A good fire, yes. Isn't it a good fire? It is a good fire, yes. And then someone pokes it a little bit, and we have a lovely time. And then the girls came and joined us, and we got some wine and some coffee and some food and snacks and stuff like that. And we just sat there. And we sat there for hours, late into the night, just piling more wood onto this fire, and we had rich conversations. With one another, we talked about dreams and futures and our ideals in life. We talked about what's going on in our hearts and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it was just great. And we were friends already, right? We went on holiday together, so it's not like we didn't know each other. But there was something in that evening that kind of cracked something open in our friendship. That there was a bond that happened there that we hadn't had before as friends. And it was just beautiful, because actually we suddenly felt like we knew each other at a deeper level. And then later, months later, we got to New Year, and we were spending New Year together. And we sat down, and we had these little cards where we fill out these. We're a bit sad, but we fill out these little things where it says, like, what's your favorite song of the year? You know, what was your favorite album? What was your favorite book of the year? All this kind of thing. Favorite film, favorite moment of the year, stuff like that. And one of the categories on there said favorite conversation. And all 6 of us put that moment as our favorite conversation of the year. And it was just one of those moments where you were like, oh, this didn't just mean something to me. This was a community thing. We had a depth of relationship there, a depth of community there that felt so like alive and life-giving. And I'm realizing now it's because God ordains it. God wants it. He wants this community. So that's why it feels so great when you build that connection with somebody or people. It feels so right and life-giving because we are wired for community. We're created to be in it. So I look back at that fire pit chat and I go, I love fire. Not just for fire's sake, but I love the community. Anybody else love fire? If you love fire, stick I love fire in the chat. I'm sure there are many fire lovers in our church. We're not pyromaniacs or anything, but you know what I mean. We'd love to stand there watching the fire and appreciating what things fire can bring to a community. But anyway, so go back to Ephesians 4. Paul here is talking about relating well with one another, right? But actually, it's a lot bigger than just being kind to one another. Gentle and humble, say those words on their own, and they sound like great words, and they're true, they're very important. But this is more than just kindness. This is more than just being nice to the people around us. Really, it's almost like he's talking about walking towards some sense of communal living, right? Now, I'm not saying literally let's all go and move in with one another. That would be obviously breaking the law right now. But actually, we're saying about be in one another's lives. Commune with one another. Share your life with each other. It says about the early church, they met every day in each other's homes. It's like, let's be connected, like not just at a surface level of nice and friendliness, but there's something deeper there that we might nurture relationships so that as we live out our calling of knowing Jesus, we are doing it together. We are working together, operating together, helping one another. Now, the Bible just simply doesn't offer this individualism way of living an option. If you're anything like me, then sometimes I can get down this habit of going, what's my future? What are my dreams? What do I want to achieve in life? How might I build my future, build my bank balance, build my influence, build my platform? How can I do that? If you're anything like me, I can slip into that quite often. In fact, sometimes I slip into this mentality, I don't know if you do, but I sometimes start finding myself thinking, even at a subconscious level, how can I be unaffected from others so that I might fulfill my calling? Have you ever felt like that? I know I have. I know I can be a bit like, people need to get out of my way in order that I might do what God wants me to do. And I'm missing the point when I think like that. You know, maybe we can even get down a temptation to feel like people are a barrier to what God wants us to do. So we need to avoid anything that's difficult when it comes to relationships in order to pursue our dream or our goal. And I just need you to know that that is not the way that God has built us to be. He's wired us so that we might be in this messy, hard, challenging environment together as a community so that we might be able to do way more and at a far better, deeper, richer level. Now, there's a psalm. In the Old Testament, there's a whole book of poems and poetry and songs, and it's called the Book of Psalms. And the 133rd psalm is written by a guy called David. And he writes this: "Behold, how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity. It is like the precious oil on the head running down on the beard of Aaron, running down on the collar of his robes. It is like the dew of the Hermon, which falls on the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord has commanded the blessing, life forevermore." Maybe that first verse that I read out then, behold how good and pleasant it is when brothers dwell in unity. Maybe you've heard that before. And that's kind of quite a reasonably well-known bit of this psalm. But that next bit, where it's talking about oil and beards and collars and stuff, can get a bit odd. In fact, I'd even argue, I'm like, is that very good poetry, David, really? I'm a bit confused by it. But when we get to what it really meant, and actually what the context it's written in and what it would mean to the people at the time, actually there's such richness in this bit. Because so here it's saying, it's like the precious oil on the head running down on the beard of Aaron. Now, Aaron was a priest in the Old Testament, and it's written in the Old Testament that the way that you would ordain or anoint a priest is by pouring oil over their head. You can imagine the scene, right? There's like oil just everywhere, and it's all over his beard, and it's all in his collars, and it's just everywhere. But this poem is saying there's something beautiful about community and this ordination, these people becoming priests, that is key in community. It's saying here that actually there is an anointing from God when there is strong unity. There is an anointing and an ordination as priests as people come together. It's as if actually when we are together in strong godly community, we can say, yeah, I'm a priest and we are priests together. You see, in the New Testament, it talks about this as well. In 1 Peter, it says, you are a chosen people. You are a royal priesthood. So in the chat, I want you to now write, I am a priest. You are a priest. As you come to know Jesus, part of our calling is that we are called to be priests, representing God to the people around us. We can guide each other, support one another, lead one another, direct, serve one another well. We are priests. But here's the beauty of strong, unified, godly community, is that not only are you a priest, but others are priests as well. That as you sit around that fire pit and have those conversations, it's not like there's one person being the priest and everyone listens to them and takes all their advice. We are called to do this together in unity. You are a priest, but actually so is everybody else who follows Jesus. So actually, why not in the chat? If you said, I am a priest, I want you to also put, and so are you. You see, we are priests together in this beautiful scene of as if we are being anointed by God in this godly community to live out our calling as followers of Jesus all together. It's not about what you do, but it's about who you are. We are ordained as priests because through our sonship, through Jesus Christ. And see, in this priesthood of believers, we are priests to one another, we care for one another. And the second thing I just need you to know about community is in community, we care. Again, it sounds very simple, but we care. When we are in a godly, unified community, reaching out to others, being priests for one another, receiving guidance from other priests in the community, right? We are caring. It is a deep care that isn't just kind, isn't just nice, although those things are so important. It is a deep, almost communal living with one another. So the question I've got is, who are your priests? Who are those people in your life that you go to? Who are those people in your life that you can be like that with, that you can be led by them and support one another in whatever missions God might have you do? I felt stirred this week because as I was working on this, God reminded me about our physical Sunday gatherings. I miss them. I really do. I miss our physical Sunday gatherings. And I know one day we'll be back meeting physically again. But I felt like God said this to me this week, and I want to bring it to all of us today. The reality of our situation right now is we don't have the luxury for coincidental community anymore. We don't have it. Let me just explain what I mean. I'd go into church sometimes on a Sunday morning and I'd go, I wonder who I'm going to bump into today. And if I bumped into somebody, I'd be like, how are you? And we'd chat and we'd have a coffee and maybe a chat for 15 minutes and we'd go, it's been so rich speaking to you. It's been so great to see you, to catch up with you. I hope, God bless you this week. See you later. And then I'd leave. Coincidental community. I didn't know I was going to bump into those people, but God reminded me that we just don't have the luxury for that anymore, do we? Like how many times are you bumping into somebody from church right now? I'll be honest, other than my wife, who I bump into quite a lot, not many. And so actually, God is almost giving us a bit of a challenge here to go, hey, now you can't meet coincidentally. What are you going to do to build godly community with others? I met with Heather and I went out for a coffee this week whilst our 3-year-old was in preschool. It was such a treat. It was amazing. We sat there and we had this coffee and had a crossword and I was like, oh, this is wonderful. I don't know, I feel like a real adult and free and everything. But as we were there, across on the far end of the cafe, we saw 2 people also having a coffee from church. They're not in a bubble. I don't think they are. I don't think they live together. And so these people had clearly put the effort in to go, hey, let's meet up. Let's do life together. Now, I have no idea what their conversation was about. It might have just been about, oh, you look great today, so do you. Isn't that nice? I don't know. But my hope is that actually, as we are purposeful about building community with one another, being part of a small group, reaching out to those person, making that phone call, sending that DM to someone, sending a message to somebody, say, hey, what are you up to next week? Let's meet up. Let's do something together. My hope is that we will build rich, fire pit style conversations that nurture godly community where we might build one another, serve one another, develop one another, strengthen one another, correct one another where we might need to. So what might you be able to do to build that community this week? What phone call do you need to make? What text message, DM do you need to send this morning, maybe even? Who are the people in your life that you already consider as priests, and maybe you just need to tell them, hey, I need you to know that I really appreciate and love this relationship that we have. I love this small group community that we have together. Who do you need to reach out and say, hey, I need you to know this, that this relationship means something to me? Let's tell one another. Let's share life with one another. Maybe this week you need to avoid the trap of individualism. Are you somebody who's been so focused on my goals? What am I going to achieve? What am I going to get done? How can I build my following? How can I build my platform? What does God want me to do? What is my destiny? Maybe God today is saying to you, hey, lay that stuff down for a while. Just build some healthy community with other people and watch me use you and work through you in that way. Just want to remind us that God doesn't work with individuals in isolation, but with people in community. And just to remind you of that Eugene Peterson quote as well, that when his relationships with us, when he makes this relationship with us, they are personal, true, intimate, yes, but private, no. They're never meant to just remain inside us. We're supposed to be sharing our lives with others. It's what we're wired for, and that's why it brings us such life. So let's avoid isolation. Let's avoid individualism in this time. Let's do everything we can. And I get it. It's hard. It's hard in this season, right? It's way harder probably than it's ever been before, but we can do it. God is in you. He has given you strength. He has given you courage so that you might go, yes, I'm going to reach out and be part of a community that is life-giving. We're going to listen to a song now. The lyrics are like, stir a passion in my heart. And my love and my desire, my sort of urge is that we will experience a passion for Jesus. Remember, it's not about just heading straight for the fruit. It's about acknowledging our core, which is the roots, going, I just have a passion for Jesus, a passion to follow him, a passion to be a child of God and to follow him with all I've got and to acknowledge that I can't do anything but just receive his grace for me. I'd love us to be able to be in a place that we're focusing on that, and then we can just watch as in community, we flourish as a community. We flourish as families. We flourish as small groups. So I want us to listen to this song and be thinking, God, what do you want to say to me today? What do I need to be part of today? What do I need to step back from today? Maybe today you're feeling pressured by this whole calling business. What am I going to do? What's my job? What's my career? What's my future? Maybe you have big decisions to make and it can feel a huge weight. Well, part of this community is about praying for one another. And now we've got this live prayer function. If you're watching on the website, kerith.church/live, you can get prayer right now. All you need to do is click the request prayer button. And up will pop a little chat room and you can chat privately just with one or two people there, one of our hosts who will just have a brief prayer with you. And I know it's not huge depth of community in just that one moment, but it can begin to nurture something where you're moving beyond just yourself in isolation, but reaching out to others. If you're watching on YouTube, then follow the link. You can jump into the website even just to receive the prayer, then jump back to YouTube if you need to. But let's listen to this song and see what God might want to say to us today.